Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we are going to be talking about productivity gains from warehouse automation in NAV, and the presenter today is going to be Bob Beard from Innovia Consulting. And we just want to let you know that we do record all of our webinars, so this will be available for you to review again, or if you'd like to share it with anyone, that will be available on our website at innovia.com by the end of the week. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to type them into the questions box, and we will get them called out at the end of our webinar during our Q&A time. So now I'll turn it over to Bob, and he'll kick off our presentation.
Great. Thanks, Angie. Welcome. And before we start, I just thought I'd give you a little background on me. So I am a customer engagement specialist with Innovia. That means I work with multiple clients kind of as a trusted advisor. And I also do some consulting with clients as well. My background is I've been a CIO. I've run a management consulting group. Been involved in multiple WMS implementations, not only related to NAV, but also with other systems. So I've got kind of a long background in this area. And today, what we want to do is talk about where you can look for productivity gains using warehouse automation and NAV. So let's go to what the objectives are for the session. So first I want to do a little bit of a big picture kind of thing, look at the competitive context and talk about the importance of a warehouse productivity so everybody understands that kind of contextual piece. Then provide an overview of where there are productivity gains and where the ROI, especially if you're going to do any kind of warehouse management system or implement even warehouse management just purely inside of NAV, where the ROI can be found. And then at the end of it, I'm going to kind of probably do a dash through this, but do a quick review of relevant NAV warehouse functionality so everybody understands where that is if you aren't really fully NAV conversant. I will warn, as I always do on these, I'm not an application consultant. So I think I've got everything right, but deep dives into the functionality I would leave more to some of our application consultants. So session agenda based on those objectives, pretty simple. I'm going to start out, talk about the big picture, and look at productivity and ROI opportunities, where those typically can be found, and how to think about them, and how to maybe even kind of calculate your ROI. And then, like I said, we'll do a quick spin through NAV and look at functionality there. So, big picture, productivity and ROI opportunities. So I'm really jumping back to big picture, which is what's going on with the supply chain. And, to talk about that, I'm going to lean a little bit on McKinsey, which is certainly a respected high-level consulting company, and what they call their supply chain 4.0 vision. Something really came out in 2016, this particular reference, but certainly is relevant now, and I think will be familiar to any of us dealing with automation and IT and where IT is going. So what McKinsey said is, here's kind of the roadmap. Supply chain, and again, this obviously warehouse automation is part of it, is just getting faster. We're reducing delivery times to hours, not days. I would even say if you look at some of the stuff Amazon and other people are doing, you could be even talking about minutes and scheduling things in minutes instead of hours and days. So everything is getting faster. I think we all recognize that. Also, supply chain is getting more flexible. So that means you've got to provide multiple options for real-time product availability and delivery. So it's not just, oh, this is the way we ship it, this is how it's going to get there. No, you have to have a kind of a menu of options. So you've got to be much more flexible, and more flexible about how you make your product available. More granular, this is an interesting idea, and maybe not always called out, but it's the individualization of product and individualization of delivery options. So, it's specific to individual companies, obviously, if you're dealing with B2B kind of things, but even down to individual consumers. So the ability to tailor your delivery, tailor your product to individuals. Obviously, then you've got to be more accurate. Mistakes aren't an option. I look at all these things, by the way, when I think of myself as a consumer. Certainly mistakes are made, but boy, if somebody screws up a delivery for me, I go to somebody else at this point. And that requires, if you're going to be more mistake-free and more accurate, that requires, as McKinsey says, more sophisticated and timely performance management. So when we're talking about warehouse, and I'm not really going to speak to this that much in this discussion, but that means look at where, if the systems you employ, and NAV doesn't have this natively, but certainly some of the warehouse management systems that you might deploy have this. How am I tracking my warehouse efficiency? How am I managing my warehouse operations, and what's my performance management? So I'm being able to track those kinds of things, measure them, provide feedback to people out on the floor, etc. And then just more efficient. So optimize everything. And again, this is what we're talking about: productivity, optimization, etc. None of this probably is a surprise to anybody. Elements of this roadmap, I believe, apply to everyone's competitive capabilities. The more granular might not for your firm right now, but I think elements of this, certainly you can pick things out here and say, yeah, that's what we've got to do. That's where things are going. So market's just going to demand that your warehouse ops meet these expectations, and you can't any longer rely on, hey, I know where things are, tribal knowledge, we've always done it this way. My people are out in the warehouse, my people in the, customer service, they know things, we can rely on gut instinct and tribal knowledge. No, you've got to have tools, you've got to have sophisticated capabilities. The mandate is to maximize your productivity, your speed, your efficiency, your accuracy. Do that in your warehouse, and frankly, do that everywhere in the supply chain. We're focusing on warehouse today. And so the challenge is to, from my point of view, and what we're going to talk about, is understand, well, where's the return on investment? That's great, but this can't cost me an enormous amount. And where do I focus my efforts? So that's what we're going to talk about really in the core of this presentation. So let's talk about productivity gains in NAV. There are a lot of NAV features and capabilities you can leverage. I mean, some of those people listening to this may already be doing it, but there's certainly, if you're not really conversant in NAV warehouse and its capabilities, there's a lot of things you can do, even when you're not using RF or mobile devices. I started writing RF data collection, but it's not really just data collection anymore. Barcode data collection. It's really mobile devices and what you can do with your mobile devices. RF guns are no longer just read things. They're really mobile devices, mobile terminals. So there's a lot you can do just using NAV, and we're talking about warehouse automation, RF and mobile device support is a huge aid. So my assumption here is that we're talking about those capabilities as well. And what I've referred to in the past and referred to as Tier 1 WMS systems. Tier 1 WMS system in the NAV universe, for me, my definition is that it's something way beyond just NAV, ADCS, mobile device capabilities, but it's something that's built on native NAV. And it provides, these systems provide an enhanced RF interface enhanced mobile device interface, and then add on additional functionality beyond what's in native NAV. So I'm including, when I talk about NAV, not just native NAV, but also tier one WMS systems. And those are things typically when you implement them are going to be 5 figures. Depending on how big your warehouse is, how many devices you have to buy, et cetera, might get into the very low 6-figure, but typically are $10,000 more, $50,000, whatever to implement. So I'm looking at those systems. There are also great and very sophisticated, what I refer to as tier 2 WMS systems. Those are systems that exist outside of NAV. So they integrate with NAV, but they're not built on NAV. They're built on their own architecture. And those systems provide a much more wide-ranging feature. They support much more complex warehouse operations, have a lot of things built into them that go beyond NAV functionality or replace and enhance NAV, what's in NAV, but do it all within their own system. So they're almost like mini ERPs that interface with NAV. I'm not talking about those in this discussion. Those are outside of this discussion because we're really talking about productivity gains in NAV. So again, I'm going to talk about native NAV and these tier 1 WMSs when I'm talking about where we can find productivity gains. So here's my little kind of standard picture. I stole this from some of the NAV training, slightly enhanced it. Just conceptual warehouse management, warehouse productivity. You know, we're talking about inbound, whether it's POs, receiving POs, transfers, returns, receiving and put away. Obviously, then picking, but picking not just for orders, picking also for production. So if you're in a manufacturing environment, and put away of assembled or manufactured finished goods. Also put away of any unused raw materials, frankly. You can see kind of in the middle here the movement and replenishment piece, so that's internal replenishment. From receiving, you've also got cross-dock, so we'll talk about that briefly, cross-dock capabilities. And then shipping, and shipping could be a sales order, it could be a transfer, it could be a return. But that's the complete kind of picture of what we're talking about. So I'm going to focus initially on looking for ROI, where you can look for ROI in the receiving and put away areas, and then we'll talk about picking, packing, and shipping. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'll talk about internal replenishment, somewhat in this area. But you know, fundamentally, this will be on receiving and put away. So a standard view, and these percentage numbers are, you know, obviously widely dependent on your business. But when you look at return on investment calculators that you'll find from warehouse management system suppliers, standardly, I'll say about 25, a good assumption, about 25% of your activity is in your receiving and put away warehouse activity. So if you're looking for productivity gains and ROI, roughly 25% of what you can expect is there. But, this is a big but from my point of view, accuracy and efficiency in receiving and put away, whether it's receiving from outside suppliers or shop floor, is just foundational for order fulfillment process. There was an old, being an old IT guy, there was an old warehouse management distribution expert named Gordon Graham. He's no longer around talking anymore. But he said everybody shortchanges receiving. You don't pay your receivers enough, as much as you pay your pickers, etc. But if you think of a warehouse as a bank, which it really is, you're putting a lot of money in the bank. If you don't put that in accurately, then how you take, you're not going to be able to withdraw it accurately either. So you really need to, when you think of receiving and put away, there's a hidden ROI here in terms of how it affects the order fulfillment process. So again, productivity gains here aren't the whole story. But let's look at some examples of where you can get ROI and productivity gains in the receiving area. One is, and when I'm talking about these, I'll talk about these examples both where I'm talking about kind of a WMS and more sophisticated mobile device and RF enablement, and then where I'm talking about you can do something just purely in native nav. So this first example is real-time call-up of the PO, the recording of the receipt, selection of the put-away bin, and recording of the put-away, all in real time. Obviously, that implies having an RF device. So if you have an RF device, um, you know, you don't have to, a lot of people will still have the POs out there, but you don't have to have the PO. You can call it up on your device, record the receipt, no paperwork shuffle, etc. Recording of the put away is all real time. You don't have to mark up any paperwork, hand it back into the office, or hand it to a data entry clerk, etc. And the put away bin, it may be automatically selected for you, right, on the device. So all that kind of automation, as again, I'm comparing this to where it's just where you're more paper-based manual. All that kind of stuff is certainly in case for ROI, right? And some systems, by the way, some tier one systems will even show you an image of the item. So if you've got items that are very similar looking, you could see an image and your receivers could validate that that's the correct item. And that's the correct item I'm putting away. It's another area where you can have ROI. Again, in this, we're talking about WMS systems. A lot of them will have the capable of when you're there, either from mobile printers or printers nearby to print barcode labels. If you want to affix on receipt your barcode labels, pallet labels, license plate labels, the ability to do that again is another area where you can have a return on investment. It's the efficiency of doing it on site, you know, at the moment, as opposed to doing it later. But it's also just the capability of being able to do that. There's also the possibility of putting away multiple orders at once, and this is native nav. So depending on the options you select, and if you're separating receipt and put away, you can sort and sequence your put away items and improve the efficiency of travel. So when I say efficiency of travel in these, I mean the guy traveling throughout the warehouse. So make him more efficient and more efficiently use your resources. So that's another area, again, on receipt where you can gain some efficiencies. As opposed to, and again, this is as opposed to doing order by order receipt and put away. And again, these all depend on your business. Order by order, depending on the number of receipts you have, the volume of transactions that are coming through, that might be perfectly fine. There's really not much efficiency. But if you're getting quite a few receipts, you do a process, let's say you're a lot of receipts in the morning, whatever, the ability to sort and sequence, hand it off to different people, have them put away in zones, all that can reduce your travel time and your resource usage in the warehouse. Another piece, and I mentioned this when we were looking at the overview, is cross-docking. Cross-docking, for those of you not familiar with that, means I've been waiting on an order to receive something, an inbound finished goods. And so what I want to know is if that finished good comes in, that I don't need to put it away. That's going to be wasting 2 steps, actually. I can just move that to the shipping dock or the shipping area. But I've got something, an order that's waiting, and once that comes in, I can ship that order. Don't put it away. That, if you have a fair amount of that, can be a definite help. I mentioned internal replenishment. Being able to automate and trigger replenishment activities so you don't have to look at, well, here's my picking bins or my forward picking bins. Oh, those are getting low. Let me go take, how much do I need to take down from my, my storage bins in the back? You can trigger that. Those things can be automated and save yourself time looking around, calculating, etc. Another thing that's maybe not typically seen, but again, there's some tier one WMSs that have some very simple QA kind of capabilities, or where you can hook in a QA system and actually do it on your handheld. So There is the possibility if you've got incoming product QA, where you can sync up with a QA functionality, third-party QA functionality, and record that with receipt. So that's just kind of a side note, but those capabilities are out there and available. And what I'm referring to is tier 1 WMS systems. So if we're looking at where the, well, how do I figure out where the dollars are? Obviously, you look at the personnel dedicated to receiving and put away. Don't just look at your direct warehouse workers. Look at those people who might be employed in data entry. There may be people in the office that are doing data entry on receiving. Same thing is going to be true on shipping, picking, and packing. And estimate the percentage of their work time done in things like sorting and reconciling received goods. The put away travel, how much time, do they do this? Just do these in reasonable percentages. And then paperwork handling and post facto transaction reporting. So the paperwork shuffle, if I'm recording things on paper and then handing them to somebody or a data entry clerk to record those, how much time is spent on that? And then efficiencies to be gained. And these numbers, again, are, I went back and looked at a number of ROI calculation spreadsheets that we've used in the past, I've used in the past. Don't take these numbers as gospel, but these are the kinds of things you can look at. So if you look at your travel time, you look at the number of people you have doing put away, it's not unusual to say 5 to 10% travel time. It could be higher, but that's not a bad number to consider when you're implementing warehouse automation. Have the effort to sort and reconcile receipts, 20 to 30%. And certainly if you're doing a lot of paper, if you're really mainly paper-based in your warehouse operations, going to automation and mobile device, you can save 80 to 90% of that time. So it's always interesting when you actually get down and run those numbers. There can be really significant savings. But then look at other things, right? So on this side and also on the picking, packing, and shipping, look at the benefits of timely, accurate, and timely receipt and put away. Does purchasing, and by the way, these are from some analysis that we've done with some clients when we go and talk to clients. Does purchasing spend time walking into the warehouse to verify stock? Do you factor that into buying? So do you go, well, I couldn't find that. I think we truly are out of it or getting low on it. But you know what, I'm going to, there's just uncertainty, so I'm going to buy a little more than I need to. So there's not only the time purchasing waste going out, verifying stock, but also the cost of maybe excess inventory. Do your order pickers find inventory where it's not supposed to be? So were things not put away accurately? Or do they go out and look for something and you just can't find it, right? Even though it really is in the warehouse because the put away wasn't in an accurate or timely fashion. Do you lose orders because you didn't think the inventory had been received yet? So if you're doing paper-based stuff, doing end-of-day processing, you might have had an order that you could have shipped. You could have cross-docked, whatever. Do you walk out to see if inventory is there before you take an order or promise an order? So all those kind of manual things that you do, you need to look at. So let's go on to order fulfillment. Again, if it's 25% on the receiving and put away, then, well, I guess it's 75% on warehouse. Again, it's just math. None of these numbers are exact, but suffice it to say that there's typically more activity, significantly more activity on the picking, packing, and shipping piece than there is on put away or even typically on internal replenishment. If you've got a lot of internal replenishment, this number could go down, that number could be more significant. So that means obviously that's where your productivity gains are going to be, but this is also the area for making sure you meet or exceed really customer expectations, and especially those of you who are shipping to retailers and large retailers, you don't pay penalties for the mistakes in shipments. So not just penalties, but you don't have a lot of return goods, etc. So Obviously, this is critical for all that competitive stuff we talked about earlier. So where can you find return on investment if you use NAV? One is efficient assignment. And again, this is if you're using data collection devices, efficiently being able to assign picks and bin locations per picks, reduce the paperwork, have all that on the handheld, have all that assigned automatically or by a warehouse supervisor directly to your warehouse workers. So reduce that handout of paperwork, get it done in real time. Also, any Tier 1 WMS will allow inventory inquiry from the handheld. So if you go to a bin and the material that you wanted to pick wasn't there, you can then at that moment say, okay, it's not here, but I still got to pick this stuff. Where else is it? And typically we even have it sorted in bin order if you've designed your bin numbers properly, and see the thing that's closest to you and go out and pick it. Same thing on the confirming an image of an item to be picked. Again, if you've got things that look physically very similar, being able to confirm that is another aid. Certainly another piece in this is native NAV functionality. Again, you don't even have to have warehouses. Being able to do waiver back picking. So not do order by order picking, but gather orders together, assign them, sort them. When I do the walkthrough, I'll NAV functionality. I'll show you that if you're not familiar with that. But have a pick worksheet. Include then obviously that makes your travel time reduced. You can pick more efficiently, faster, and reduce the number of resources you need. These next two really have to do with, again, that kind of Tier 1 WMS. So packing efficiency, really automate your recording, your packing, support for your packing operations. You can print customer required labels. Tier 1 WMSs allow that, and again, are often integrated with shipping, are actually, in almost every case I know of, integrated with shipping software. So you can print shipping labels. So the whole packing and shipping process can be sped up with warehouse automation and particularly when you include shipping software as well. And there really can be significant gains there. By the way, some systems will also, when you're going out and you say, oh, this product, we've got 10 cases of this product in this bin. Your guy goes to the bin and there's only 8, or there's not enough. You could actually do a cycle count on the bin at that moment, so that you're just continually correcting the bins, even post that count. One note on that functionality, if you do use it, people that are already out that have been assigned picks, they're not going to see that change in inventory. But that ability, again, can just improve your overall efficiency. So your inventory is corrected again, real-time inventory accuracy. So let's again, how do I calculate this? How do I dollarize this? Same thing. Look at the number of people you've got involved in picking, packing, and shipping. Estimate the percentage of time in these various activities, traveling, searching, etc. Look at the efficiencies to be gained. I didn't have something in my examples, my kind of best-in-class examples of efficiencies for packing, labeling, prepping for shipping, but I would certainly expect 20 to 30% is not an unreasonable amount. But you should get a feel from what you see in the capabilities of systems you're looking at, where those dollars are, where those percentages are. But the reduction in travel time, again, is typically 5 to 15%. I'm searching for things. So if you really right now are just going out and looking for where things are, you're not using RF, you guys, you're not directed, you're not using bins properly. Obviously, you can warehouse automation, you can save 80 to 90% of your searching time. And same thing on paperwork reduction. But again, look at other benefits for accurate and timely shipment. You're going to lower your return goods cost. We talked about that. Reduce penalties from customers, and frankly, have fewer lost sales. And if you do all of this accurately, there's other benefits that you can dollarize. There are a few other areas that I haven't talked about. One is, and again, that's part of warehouse automation in NAV. That's cycle counting. So NAV has the native capability of triggering cycle counts and doing cycle counting. If that's going to improve your inventory accuracy, improve your faith in your purchasing decisions. It's all the benefits of improved order fulfillment. And by the way, I haven't talked a lot about this, but don't forget the benefits we were talking about in terms of manufacturing. So, if your inventory is accurate, your raw materials inventory is accurate, you can start an assembly job or a production job. You can start those things and know you're going to be able to do it, schedule with confidence, etc. We haven't talked about this, but if you do have items, if you're in the food industry or anything where you've got chemicals, where you've got expiration dates, NAV has the capability of expiration date management. So that reduces your obsolete inventory costs. You can pick on a FIFO basis, which is first expired, first out. That can be critical if you're in a industry where that's required, and that's the capability of NAV. I talked about internal replenishment. That NAV has the capability for automating internal replenishment, and that allows you again to maintain those forward picking locations more easily, more accurately. Schedule your replenishment time if you do it on third shift, overnight, whatever. Schedule that, have all that batched. Another little piece is, if you have quarantine inventory, sometimes people don't do this, use this functionality, but if you have inventory that failed QA, but you still got it in-house, you can put it in a location and make sure that it's not a location that you can pick from, and it's not viewed as something that's available for shipment. And another kind of minor functionality that some people use, none of my clients right now, but there is something called break bulk functionality. So if there's an alternate unit of measure, you've got something in cases, but you also sell it in eaches, you can break that case if eaches aren't available in inventory. So that's another capability in NAV that can improve your productivity and efficiency. So I want to keep this at a reasonable time, so I am going to now do just a quick spin through NAV. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. All these slides will be available. You can certainly refer to the slide deck online and look at this, and there's certainly other presentations. One I did about 6 months ago that talks about this in a little more detail. So if you're not that familiar with NAV, the location record is really kind of a key starting point. If you're looking in the Kronos, the test database, the white warehouse is where directed pick and put away is marked. But really the point is here this is where you're setting up your warehouse, the functionality that apply to that warehouse, to that location. You can set, here's my default receipt bin, here's my default shipment bin for production. This is where to and from production comes, etc. Here's where adjustments. So you can set all those things automatically. Again, so that your warehouse people are directed automatically. I mean, that stuff's automatically filled in. So that's fundamental. And then after your locations, you also have zones. So a zone is an area in a warehouse that has a specified function, or it can be, a zone can be set up, and this is important for warehouse automation, where my pickers are going to be. I'm going to have my pickers assigned to a specific zone for efficiency's sake, and they're going to pick just in that zone. A bin, as you no doubt, hopefully are aware, is the smallest unit of storage in a warehouse. By the way, you don't have to have zones, but bins are really critical in terms of anything we're looking at in terms of warehouse automation. Obviously, it takes a lot of planning to lay things out. I'll talk a little bit more about zones. In zones, you can define defaults. You can define default bin types. We'll talk about bin types in a second. The zone ranking, which is something that, again, is copied to all bins in a zone, can be overridden in an individual bin. You can define a warehouse class to talk about storage conditions or requirements. Those aren't enforced automatically in NAV, but they are there. They're data you can use. Just same thing with special equipment. Here's a quick look at zones. You can see there's a cold storage zone. There's a QC zone, right, that's defined. Again, we're not going to spend a lot of time on these. Bins are more important. Bin type can restrict the functionality of bins. So you can say this is the bin that I don't pick from, right? I don't pick orders directly from. You can use the bin ranking to specify the sequence bins are used for pick and put away. You can also note things like maximum cubage or weight for a bin. Again, NAV does not have, and the tier 1 WMSs don't have typically. Enforcing that, mechanism for enforcing that, that's the kind of thing you'll find in the tier 2 WMS, but that is there for note. Special equipment, same thing. So you know when special equipment is required. And again, here's a picture of bin functionality. All these bins, you can see 60 and 50, so that's for sequencing on picks. They're all in the white warehouse. These are all put away. You can see the maximum cubage, etc. And if you look up bins, you can see this is dynamically maintained if they're dedicated or if they're empty at the time. Just a brief visual picture of bins and zones. Bins are, you've got a location. Zones are within the location, and bins are within zones. You can also define things on the item card. So a lot of this stuff at the item or even SKU level mirrors some of the bin zone informations. But items are where you specify things like your counting requirements. If you have a different put away unit of measure, right? And is this also where you define if that item can be cross-docked? So again, those are things we talked about in the ROI, and this is where you define those. Item tracking, I didn't talk about a lot about that, but that's lot or serial code tracking. So if it's FIFO, you can identify item tracking at the item level. Something called put away templates are specified here. I'm not going to go, I'll show you an example of that, not going to go into that. This is where you get into fairly complex put away rules. So at the item level, you specify for this item, use these put away rules. That's for directed put away. Weight and volume are on the inventory tab on an item. And here's a view of the item card. And I didn't have the inventory tab, weight and volume are there. Again, that's not functionality that's really used for automation in NAV or most tier 1 WMSs, but it's there. But here's where you say the put away template, the physical inventory period code, etc. Special equipment is required, and cross-docking down here. There you can either use directed put away or not use directed put away. A lot of clients, even ones using WMS systems, don't use directed put away, and it's a level of complexity that not everybody needs or frankly can manage. But if you select directed put away here, this automatically checks all those grayed out boxes, which really means you're breaking up your receipt from your put away, your pick from your shipment. Directed put away brings those zones into play. It supports one of the more sophisticated processes. If you don't do directed put away, then your bin selection is either your last bin that you used or a fixed bin. If you say this product always goes into this bin. So if you don't use directed put away, you're shutting yourself out of some functionality. But if you do use it, you've got to make sure you're really capable of doing it. It's more complex setup and processes. Mentioned a put away template. This is an example of it. You can see how complex. So this says put away, for your first thing is you find my fixed bin. So this item always goes in this bin. Find the same items always in the bin in the same unit of measure. And it's a bin with less than the minimum quantity. Oh, if you can't find that, find the fixed bin, find the same item, find the same unit of measure. Oh, if you can't find that, find a floating bin where the same item already is in the same unit measure. If not that, same item, etc. So you can set up some pretty complex rules. I think this gives a feel about, well, do I really want to manage at this level or not? Again, that's your choice, but it is some functionality that can help automation. It's not directed put away. You pick and choose the other options you want to turn on. Bin mandatory is a key thing. You're really pretty essential for inventory counting. You need to know things are in bin. If you select, as I said before, require shipment and or require receive, then your picks and or your putaways can be batched. Otherwise, you're doing order by order. And we talked about the efficiency gains if you're doing excuse me, batch picking or even batching put away. So a few notes on picking. Well, that's what we talked about, wave picking. Use a pick worksheet. I'm going to show that in a minute. You can draw from multiple documents. You can set your parameters around the pick, and bin ranking comes into play. I'm going to go to the pick worksheet here just to show you this. So this is all the things you can check, right? If you're doing a pick worksheet, I can say, I want to do a pick per item. I want to just pick from it by zone. I want my pick worksheet to be sorted by zone. Oh, and on top of that, you know, my guys can only manage X number of pick lines. So I only want X number of pick lines, max or pick source stocks, pick orders. Assigned users, I can assign users at this point. So there's a lot of things you can do in a pick worksheet that relate to what we're talking about in picking efficiency. And again, you don't need RF devices to do this. You can just hand somebody a pick worksheet and they can go out and pick it and they can manually record things. But this can all, again, come through the RF devices. Internal replenishment, I talked about that before. This is, again, if you have pick bins or forward picking bins or whatever you want to call them, you can replenish this from your bulk storage. You can set this up in NAV, specifying fixed bin locations. You can, in other words, I always pick this item from here. So my minimum and maximum bin content, you set things up, as you see here, is a fixed bin. That's the item in the bin, minimum quantity and the maximum quantity. And once you set those things up, you can replenish, you can calculate your bin replenishment, and it's going to come out with results and say, here's what you have to do. Hand that to your replenishment shift or your replenishment people, and again, automate that kind of process. We talked a little bit about where ROI is. Again, blocking movement, you can block that at the bin level, specific items. The break bulk, being able to pick in an alternate unit measure, break a case, break a pallet, whatever. Expiration dates, that's other NAV functionality. Cycle counting, we talked about those. And you can assign workers to a warehouse location. So that was my quick spin through NAV. Hopefully, for those of you not familiar with some of those NAV capabilities, that gave you an idea. There's certainly other webinars we've done, one I've done that talks about that in a little more depth. So that's today's presentation. I hope that gave you a feel for where you can find productivity, warehouse productivity in NAV. Thanks for attending. And I think at this point, Angie will ask any questions.
None have come through yet, Bob, so we'll give it just a few moments. Thank you for the presentation. It was very well informative.
Good, thank you. I hope the people watching found it that way, and those who watch later.
All right, well, thank you again, everyone, for attending, and thank you, Bob, for the presentation. We look forward to seeing you on one of our future webinars. And next week, we will be at Summit in Phoenix, Arizona. So please come visit us at booth 529. And we would love to talk with any of you from the different companies that are attending. So 529 is our booth at Summit. And then the following week, we will pick up on a webinar that our own Daniel Palmer will be presenting on. He'll be presenting on creating and copying companies in NAV 2018. So if you'd like to attend that webinar or any of our future webinars, feel free to visit our events page on our website. And that's innovia.com. All right. Thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.